Schlosser, and I would like to welcome you to the presentation titled Mindfulness Training to Improve the Behavioral Health of Astronauts in Current and Future Deep Space Missions. I would like to begin with an apology. I couldn't travel, unfortunately. Despite my great expectations, this was not possible. Thankfully, my colleague and friend, Dr. Susan Jewell, offered to help me out and present this work on my behalf. Thank you so much, Susan, for making this possible. I'm a PhD candidate in psychology at the Goldsmiths University of London, where I focus on individual and team behavioral health outcomes. I develop the relevant psychotherapeutic trainings based in third wave cognitive behavioral therapies and mindfulness. I'm a mindfulness teacher trained by the Oxford Mindfulness Center, and I teach the same subjects, acceptance and commitment therapy and mindfulness, at the Institute of Psychology, Psychiatry and Neuroscience, King's College London. In 2017, the Association for Contextual Behavioral Science awarded me with a grant to pilot these kind of trainings in human space exploration. I am now proud to say that this reached a level where we received invitation to carry out these kind of studies on ISS astronauts. I hope we are able to realize this in the near future. For these endeavors and efforts, I received the European Space Leader Award in 2022 from the Space Generation Advisory Council. The interventions I develop, design and implement and eventually test in these challenging, adverse and extreme contexts are largely based in these three processes: mindfulness, acceptance and commitment processes. And they focus on developing different kind of behaviors which allow functionally adaptive behaviors in any given context. The research was focusing on various kinds of space analogs, expeditions, peak performance scenarios like the Olympic Paralympic Games, ISS flight controllers, and recently astronauts. Behavioral health is a construct that basically underlies any human behavior and the relevant psychological processes. It is the study and management, therefore it is the study and management of different biopsychosocial factors that underlie functional adaptation and effectiveness, as well as mental and physical health and related behaviors, well-being, sustainable resilience of an individual in a particular context. It is quite clear why behavioral health is an important construct also in team efforts such as astronautics. There are various kind of behavioral health and performance challenges appearing in current space missions, whether they are orbital or suborbital, and some of these are related to the stress caused. Now, when the stress appears in a longer time, it becomes chronic and prolonged. It exerts various degrees of pressure on the human nervous system. The longer a mission, the larger these effects may be, and the higher we up, and the farther we are from Earth, the larger they may be. So it's expected that future deep space missions will have greater level of behavioral health challenges than what we anticipate in suborbital or orbital flights. Nevertheless, it is important that we carry out research in these domains because these are the best indicators we currently have to prepare for unknown unknowns. The ESA Science Roadmap also lists mindfulness training as a possible counter and mitigation measure, which should be explored since 2019. So I really would like here the audience to consider the potential benefit mindfulness can give and different kind of associated interventions can give and offer to support astronaut health. We already know from ground research that, an extensive ground research, that mindfulness benefits people in various ways. And some of these benefits were observed in analog or ISS or among ISS personnel in relation to various mission critical outcome variables in behavioral health, like performance increase, improvement in resilience, improvement in stress appraisal, and that way contributing to mental health. We know that it improves team cohesion and autonomy of a team. Particular leadership competencies were observed among coaches and commanders of analogs here. This way, the organizational health of a team or a crew was observed, and the communication between team and among its members are also strengthened. This is a lot of importance when it comes to in and out group effects observed by Nicholas and described by him. From research during COVID-19 curfews, we understand that mindfulness can improve people working isolatedly in confinement, perhaps in loneliness. And the effects of these can be mitigated through the practice of mindfulness, as well as the effects of sensory deprivation and monotony can be mitigated. From performance and military research, we know that mindfulness can improve cognitive functioning. Namely, including my own research, we know that mindfulness is able to increase working memory, and it can also increase the so-called process called task switching. This is actually a key effect of mindfulness because it works in a way that it helps to anchor people's attention and move away from being fixated on some sort of distracting or difficult private experience of a thought or an emotion, and move on and refocus the attention towards the desired outcome or the target, perhaps something that is more meaningful or needed or functionally relevant in the given context. So this can have particular importance, especially in long-duration missions, but also under stressful situations, perhaps during suborbital flights with less experienced personnel. We also know, or we also suspect, that mindfulness could have relevant benefits to the neurobiology of the body and the nervous system, particularly the brain. We've been observing various kinds of changes within the nervous system, and it's associated with the time spent in space and the degree of radiation exposure. So some mindfulness research, which is already quite extensive on ground, shows that possibly some of the areas related or kind of associated with the damage caused by space could be mitigated by mindfulness practice. This has incredible implications if we consider long-duration spaceflight. It is important to note that mindfulness is a training where people become more comfortable with the discomfort they experience. This is an important quality of any crew members. Perhaps most importantly, mindfulness has the potential to facilitate the overview effect through non-referential compassion. Astronauts experiencing the overview effect described by Professor Frank White talk about kind of AVE and an outstanding experience where they understand that the planet functions as one ecosystem where everything that is available on our planet, the diversity of species, humans, and whatever we created, the culture is accessible nowhere else. This itself, I think, personally speaking here, I believe the overview effect is the largest and the most important gift of space exploration. We should teach people how to experience this, and Frank White in somewhere around 2014 gave an interview to NASA where he himself hypothesizes that this is kind of a similar experience to what Buddhist experience, and perhaps it's associated with the ability to understand and relate and gain this insight. So in my work, I hypothesize that with mindfulness, we can increase the overview effect. We have ongoing research with virtual reality where we are testing this, and we presented the outcomes last year at the IAC. Right. I should say that human behavior is inseparable from its context. This is kind of a basic statement, if you wish, but when you come to behavioral science, it's extremely important because in behavioral science, we try to strengthen the functional relationships people have to the context. So this means adaptive behaviors. In other words, we are teaching people how can they carry out actions, behaviors meaningfully in the given context, resiliently, despite experiencing various kinds of stressors and difficulties, and maintain this tendency, even in extreme environments. So you might ask, all right, but how does this relate to mindfulness? And in my PhD research, I focus on this process. You can see this process over here. This is a diagram depicting how people in a challenging or a person in a challenging environment is defined by the underlying psychological processes which impact the person's behavioral health outcomes. We can facilitate the relevant psychological processes and increase those and improve those so that the person can carry out more functional behaviors through mindfulness and acceptance commitment trainings. To make sure that this is on spot and we are not teaching people to shield themselves away and stonewall themselves in difficult and challenging scenarios, we actually implement a functional analysis and teach people to functionally understand their own behavior so that they can understand that one behavior they have learned to cope with a difficulty might not be successful in another one. This is important because even among mindfulness practitioners, there's some evidence that people carry out experiential avoidance with the use of mindfulness. So it's very important that we teach people that how to avoid experiential avoidance even when you practice mindfulness. Here you can see a diagram from my PhD research, how I modulate the underlying psychological processes. In particular, here I start with being present in the moment and establishing a pragmatic sense of reality through mindfulness. In other interventions, this diagram might look differently, exactly because of the functional analysis I carry out with clients and teams. In other cases, I might start with doing what matters or carrying out acceptance or experiential avoidance related trainings. This really depends on the individuals and the team. And some teams and some individuals are different than others. Therefore, it is really depends on the context and individual differences how to begin the mindfulness training. But here, in this particular training carried out with ISS personnel, I begin the work with mindfulness to increase behavioral health outcomes. We should think about mindfulness as a skill, something that can be developed. We all have an inherent ability of tackling adversity, and we all have a degree of inherent or dispositional ability to be present in the moment, in other words, being mindful. But this skill, this ability, this trait can be improved. And this skill takes practice, and the practice takes a skilled teacher to experience the various kind of how to put it, maybe important milestones in mindfulness practice, so that one can meaningfully utilize mindfulness in adversity. It's important to note we cannot learn, for example, it's advised for people experiencing recurrent depression that they don't start practicing mindfulness in the middle of an episode, but they do it when they're out of it. Similar, we are not supposed to teach, maybe teaching mindfulness for people who are already experiencing adversity might not be as beneficial or maybe counterproductive than when they are in a relatively safe place. So in other words, I'm trying to lead you to the realization that mindfulness should be trained on ground as part of astronaut training, and perhaps it should expand from the astronaut crews to other mission critical personnel like the astronaut operations team. And we have been demonstrating some of these trainings with the Austrian Space Forum, but also the European Space Agency. So it's important to note that it is not about the content of one's thoughts or emotions, but it is about the relationship to the internal experience. We can change or work with that relationship to carry out functional adaptive behaviors. In other words, it's not about the amount of stress. We won't be able to protect people to experience stress. We shouldn't limit the content of stress or the amount of stress. We should change how people can deal with stress and how they can appraise stress. And there's a good amount of evidence now across various kinds of applied settings, including my PhD, looking at the relationship between stress, mental health, and productivity. And we know that there's a weak moderate relationship, and we also know that mindfulness is roughly able to cater for this amount of lack. So we know that trait mindfulness can modulate these outcome variables roughly with a weak moderate effect. Here I just summarize the available evidence in the field, particularly in relation to space exploration. Most of the work focuses on theoretical discussions. There is some descriptive research focusing on mindfulness disposition in analogs. And there's a few quasi-experimental studies performed in analogs, as well as longitudinal survey during COVID-19 is very useful in these domains. While only a few quasi-experimental ongoing efforts, quasi-experimental studies are looking at training professional astronauts or astronaut operation teams. So most of this work was carried out in the field of neuroscience by Della Torre or Professor Francesco Pagnini in relation to trait mindfulness and the possibility to train trait mindfulness. And most of my work has been focusing on the direct applications of these with ISS astronaut operation teams or crew members, whether analog or in spaceflight contexts. These are the main findings. Most of it was described to you already. There are relevant behavioral health outcomes which are mission critical to any mission of current spaceflight, whether it's suborbital, orbital, or one day going beyond low Earth orbit. Here, I just would like to emphasize some of the learning outcomes and the perspectives I gained throughout this work. I call researchers to emphasize the importance of process-based therapy, of a process-based therapy approach in space exploration, focusing at the underlying processes, including mindfulness, when they carry out experimental research. To apply the so-called functional contextual skill acquisition model of human behavior, this is extremely important because we need to carry out functional adaptive behaviors in any given context. And this requires flexibility of people understand what is required in that given context. Next is to emphasize an organizational perspective. Most research really enjoys focusing on crew members, but as it was shown before, it's really important that we also address and we also work with the mission control and support, or astronaut operations team, the medical teams, and even the management. They together contribute to the whole ecosystem of the mission, and it's important that everybody has the same kind of standards. You try to use intensive longitudinal designs, diary, or intensive longitudinal measures, or the alteration of these, and collect various kinds of data, not just subjective measures of self-reported questionnaires, or quantitative data, but also qualitative data of private accounts, personal experiences, and to, most importantly, to collect objective digital or biomedical data, biomarkers, and to possibly one day carry out the first neuroimaging study in space. I would like to thank your attention, and I would like to thank Susan for her immense help to make this presentation possible. Thank you for your attention.